Hello everyone in a new video on the channel. Today we are going to take the first look at the phenomenon of alien abductions. As we will hopefully discover along this journey, the phenomenon itself is much older than many people realize, but for the sake of the narrative we are going to start with what is possibly the best recorded and attested encounter of such kind. The rumored abduction of Betty and Barney Hill, which was heard about by many people, including those not explicitly interested in the phenomenon as such. The alleged abduction of Betty and Barney Hill took place on the night of the 19th to 20th September 1961. The couple were traveling through some rural areas of the state of New Hampshire, returning home from holidays. To provide some background here, the couple lived in Portsmouth in New Hampshire. Barney was 39 at the time of the experience and worked with the United States Postal Service and was an active member of the civil rights movement. Betty was 42 at the time and was a social worker, also involved in the civil rights movement. The couple were well respected in their community, including their religious community, and widely considered to be solid and reliable people. The incident took place en route from Montreal and Niagara Falls to the couple's home. South of Lancaster in New Hampshire, Betty noticed a bright point of light moving across the sky between the moon and Jupiter. While she initially thought it may be a falling star, the upwards motion of the objects quickly dispelled the thought. The objects started moving erratically and became visibly bigger and brighter, which prompted Betty to ask Barney to stop the car and take a better look at the object, which he did. As they stopped, Betty observed the object through binoculars and noticed what she dubbed an odd-shaped craft with flashing and colorful lights. She concluded it may be a flying saucer, an object her sister observed a few years prior. Barney also took a look through the binoculars and at first sight thought it's a star, a satellite, or an airliner flying towards Vermont. He also changed his mind, and rather quickly as the object rapidly changed its trajectory and seemed to approach the couple, descending as it did. Barney decided the best course of action would be to resume driving while the two continued to observe the object. As they did, the object became big enough in the visible field for Betty to conclude it was about 40 feet or 12 meters long and seemed to be rotating while flying. It continued its erratic motions across the sky. Approximately 1 mile south of the Indian Head Mountain, the object quickly descended and moved towards the Hill's vehicle. This maneuver had Barney stop the car in the middle of the highway. The craft stopped mid-air above the car at an altitude of about 90 feet or just short of 30 meters. Barney mentioned later it resembled a massive pancake. As Barney was armed with a pistol, he bravely took a few steps forward and closer to the object. He noticed the object was manned and hosted between 8 and 11 humanoid occupants seemingly looking at him. All those occupants except one moved to the rear of the hallway in the front part of the craft. The one remaining occupant communicated with Barney telepathically, saying, "Stay where you are and keep looking." Barney also recalled that the beings wore what looked like black uniforms and black caps. He also seemingly somehow knew that those beings were not human. The craft then descended to about 60 feet or 20 meters overhead and about 90 meters away from the couple. Barney felt like he had to return to the car, claiming the beings are going to capture them. What followed was a blank space in the memory of the Hills, who regained their senses in the car. They continued their journey home, pondering what had actually transpired. Upon arriving home, a series of unusual occurrences followed in the wake of the strange event. Betty wanted to keep their holiday luggage near the rear door of the property and wanted to dispose of extra food left over from the trip, while Barney discovered the strap of the binoculars became torn without him ever recalling this happening. The toes of his shoes were also scratched. The watches of the couple also refused to work. They decided to take long showers in case of any potential contamination. While showering, Barney felt an urge to check his private parts, though he did not discover anything unusual. The Hills concluded that something really strange has happened and tried to recollect the events as they happened. They did recall a buzzing sound at the encounter location, and after that sensation they failed to recall anything in detail, remembering just fragmented pieces of the event. This made they decided to catch up on sleep. After a few hours, Betty awoke and placed her clothing and shoes she had on the night before into the wardrobe. It was then that she noticed that her dress had a tear at the hem, zipper and lining, and moreover it was covered in some sort of a pink powder which blew away as she moved the clothes around. The Hill's car showed concentric shiny circles on its trunk. As advised by a friend of Betty's sister who was a physicist, the Hills brought a compass close to the newfound pattern. The device went haywire every time it was in the proximity of the odd lines. This activity subsided over time. Being perplexed, the couple decided to seek for help, or at least a listening ear. They conducted a long interview with Walter Webb, a local astronomer who confirmed the testimony to be most likely truthful and reliable, except for minor details, and as such discrepancies which could be easily ascribed to stress. 10 days after the strange encounter, Betty started experiencing vivid dreams for 5 nights. This occurrence never returned again, but seemed to trouble her. The couple started a dream journal in November. In one of her dreams, the Hill saw a roadblock and men who surrounded their car. Betty dreamed that 2 small men were forcing her to walk in a forest at night, with Barney being led behind her. As she called his name, Barney was unresponsive, as if sleepwalking or hypnotized. The men guiding the couple were about 5 feet tall or just there, dressed in blue uniforms with caps resembling military attire. The skin of those beings was grey, although their general visage was largely human. As they also sought medical help, more details seemed to come to light. The Hills recalled that their journey felt longer than it should have been, but upon such a closer analysis it turned out they experienced missing time, and their journey took about 7 hours instead of 4. They also did not recall the 30-ish mile stretch from the point of their encounter. The doctors they visited suggested hypnosis, and although Barney was initially not too keen on it, he agreed as he thought it might help Betty deal with her strange dreams. The hypnotic session was eventually conducted by Dr. Benjamin Simmons. During the session, Barney reported that the binocular strap tore while he ran from the strange craft to their car. He now also recalled driving away from the spot, but he also felt compelled to drive off the road and into the woods, where the couple saw 6 men standing on the dirt road. There the car stalled and the men approached the Hills. Barney mentioned one of the men having a cap with a visor, looking like a commander of the group. Barney described the beings similar to how Betty did. The men stared into his eyes with a mesmerizing and trancing effect. He mentioned those beings as being in his brain. Betty recalled the beings communicating in English, while Barney mentioned they mumbled in an incomprehensible language. The messages he understood were transmitted via thought transference or telepathy. The craft had fin-like wings and red lights. Betty's session yielded a different order of events and slight differences in the description of the technology they saw, but the events themselves were described consistently by the couple. The doctor conducting the session deemed the memories to be a psychological aberration. Initially, the Hills omitted the details of what seemed to be medical examinations on board the craft carried out by its occupants. Betty was told not to be afraid and that the beings wanted to conduct some tests. The couple were separated and Betty was asked questions about her lifestyle, with the beings apparently not understanding words referring to food products and could not comprehend the concept of time. Hair, skin and nail samples were collected from her and she was scanned using a rod, including many needles connected to a wire, which was in turn connected to some kind of a machine. Her navel was punctured with a 6-inch long needle in what was apparently a pregnancy test. One of the beings pulled on her teeth and asked why Barney's teeth came out and Betty's did not, to which she explained that Barney used dentures. Betty asked for something she could prove the encounter with, and the leader allegedly gave her a book with alien writing in it. However, the book was taken away from her, and after an argument, the beings decided that the memory of the event should be wiped away in the Hills. The part was apparently a recollection of Betty's dreams. Barney's examination seemed to be much more traumatic. In addition to his dentures being removed, he was also subjected to an internal examination per rectum and a sample of his genetic material was collected as semen. If you find the audio recordings from the hypnotic sessions of the Hills, which are available, Barney's recollection of events sounds genuinely and extremely traumatic, including panicked screams and evident experience which was painful both physically and mentally. This single fact alone could explain the suppression of memories of the event. Afterwards, the Hills resumed their lives and generally did not seek clout with their experience. They did, however, accept the occasional meetings with UFO researchers and shared their experiences with family and friends. Their story was eventually published in 1965 by the Boston Traveler newspapers and by the United Press International Agency, which made the Hills garner international recognition. In 1966, John Fuller wrote the book The Interrupted Journey with cooperation of the Hills. The book also mentioned that Betty was shown what seemed to be a sketch of a star map aboard the strange craft. This map was later analyzed in 1968 by an amateur astronomer Marjorie Fish. She concluded that the map overlaps onto a section of the night sky, indicating the double star system of Zeta Reticuli as its key element, leading to an implied conclusion that this was the home location of the visitors. This map, eventually sent to the Astronomy magazine, was deemed to be incorrect by scientists. However, it opened a debate regarding UFOs in the magazine. The map itself was also later dismissed by Carl Sagan in 1980 and deemed inaccurate according to more precise star observations in 1990s. When it comes to the Hills themselves, Barley passed away early, unfortunately, aged 46 in 1969 due to stroke. Betty never married again and continued to enjoy a status of a celebrity in the UFO circles, eventually passing away in 2004 at the age of 85. What actually happened to the Hills then? Was it a legitimate encounter with otherworldly visitors, or was it a hoax? People who have tried debunking the Hills over the years indicate that big elements of their story could be ascribed to psychological factors. Barney was a World War II veteran and displayed symptoms of the condition diagnosed today as PTSD. He also experienced racism, and the couple, being interracial, was not exactly a typical one in early 1960s. The compounded chronic stress combined with sleep deprivation and travel fatigue were supposedly behind the misperception of an aircraft guiding beacon as a UFO craft. Several years after the event, Betty was also shown photographs and live images of lights generated by natural and human-made sources, and she apparently mistook some of those for UFOs, which also seemed to match the claimed inability of the Hills to distinguish an actual non-human craft from prosaic objects. Other claims also hint at the fact that the reported memories of the Hills may have been influenced by the content presented at the time in the Outer Limit TV series, which often enough covered the topic of potential extraterrestrial visitors. On the other hand, those who believe that the Hills have actually encountered an otherworldly craft and visitors point out the ability of the couple to provide a generally matching recollection of events under hypnosis provided separately, their lack of initiative and actions aimed at gaining any personal fame or riches from their story, as well as the consistency with many other reports of alleged alien abductions, the symptoms of missing time, telepathic communication, the apparent ability of the non-human beings to be able to almost freeze a person and make them obedient to commands and suggestions, which are now a staple of statements provided by many abductees. Have the Hills managed to tap into some subconscious current of thoughts and imagery common for all of humanity, or have they indeed had an objective experience of a close encounter? This is a thought I would like to leave you with today, dear viewer. In the next episode dedicated to the abductions, we will take a look at the case of Travis Walton and see if there are any similarities and contradictions compared to the case of the Hills. However, the next video will be dedicated to one of the alleged crash and retrieval operations regarding UFOs or UAPs. Until then, look up to the sky and remain vigilant.